Hello and welcome. You're watching the news with me, Ramesh Ramachandran. In news just coming in, Punjab Congress lawmakers protest in Parliament demanding financial help for the families of those who were killed by the so-called Islamic State in Iraq's Mosul. Dramatic visuals coming from the Indian Parliament, where some leaders climbed atop the building holding placards. These are the latest visuals coming to you from inside India's Parliament. As I mentioned, where lawmakers from the northern Indian state of Punjab climbed atop the building, holding placards and demanding compensation for the families of the 38 Indians whose mortal remains were brought back to India yesterday. Right, so these, as I mentioned, these are the latest visuals coming to you from India's Parliament in New Delhi, where lawmakers from the northern Indian state of Punjab, especially those who are affiliated to the Congress party in that state, protesting inside India's Parliament House, demanding financial help for the families of those who were killed by the so-called Islamic State in Iraq's Mosul. Remember, they went missing in June 2014, and only yesterday, nearly 4 years after they went missing, India brought the mortal remains of those Indians back home. Right, joining me live from the WION newsroom is my colleague Mohammed Saleh. Good morning, Mohammed. Dramatic visuals there, isn't it?
Good morning. And almost shameful visuals is how it has to be described. Now, we are used to seeing MPs, members of parliament, jumping into the well of the house, but this is almost unprecedented, standing on top of the parliament. This is a sort of a protest that we have not witnessed in India's democracy. Yes, the cause is perfectly justified. The sentiment is understood. They are demanding for better compensation. They're demanding that, the government needs to do more for the family members of the 38 Indians who were killed by the so-called Islamic State in Iraq. But the manner in which they have treated the temple of democracy, the Parliament House in India, is almost unprecedented, jumping onto the rooftop to try and get their voices heard. At this point of time, this is essentially done in a very dramatic way, in a very theatric way, to try and get the cameras onto them, because that is the only objective that I can think of as to why the parliamentarians that we have on our screens, 3 parliamentarians from Punjab there, standing on the rooftop of the parliament to try and get their message across. Could they have done it in a different way is something which is up for question, but it also points to the plummeting standards of politics in our society and in our democracy, where parliamentarians feel that the best way that they can try and get attention to what they have to say, to the demands that they have to put forth, is by resorting to theatrics of this nature.
Indeed, and Mohammed, as we've been discussing here on WION yesterday and this morning as well, while this is a very somber moment for the families themselves, politics seems to be taking over as the Congress is, trying to outweigh the BJP, the ruling BJP in New Delhi, and calling it the action a bit too late to bring back the remains back to India.
That's exactly correct here, Ramesh. Now, the theatrics aside, they have certain issues that the government actually needs to look at and address as soon as is possible. Now, compensation is one of their demands which the government will have to speak on. The Punjab government has, of course, announced a certain compensation. Now, the MPs are demanding that the central government also should come forth and announce a bit of compensation. Now, at the same time, the manner in which the central government has perhaps conducted itself in this entire saga of first giving out information as to what has happened, and also the manner in which the bodies have been brought back, has left a lot to be desired. Now, one of the principal complaints which the family members have got against the government, in which this entire controversy has been handled by the government, is why did the government choose to announce that the 39 Indians who were missing were indeed dead in the House of the Parliament, and the news reached to them through news channels. This is what the family members are demanding as to why did the government have to resort to this means of communication. Could this have been done in a more sensitive manner? Now, secondly, at this point of time, Ramesh, the fact of the matter is also the fact that yesterday, for the first time, VK Singh came forth and said that the 40 Indians who were abducted by the ISIS, they had gone to Iraq without proper adequate travel documents. They had gone there illegally. Some people have also raised questions as to, did he really need to say that at a time when the families are trying to come to terms with the loss that they have suffered? It's a very somber moment. It's a very solemn moment. Did he need to come forth and say, look, these are people who had gone there illegally. These had gone there as illegal migrants. And the government of India's hands were pretty much tied in terms of helping them out in this case. So there are several question marks that, in fact, that this particular incident has brought forth. And what we are seeing today are extremely sorry scenes. And the fact that the 39 Indians who are missing in Iraq should have brought and united us as a nation. But unfortunately, this is something that is being used to play petty politics by our politicians. And perhaps this is one of the worst scenes that we have seen, where 3 politicians have decided that the message that they've got can only be conveyed by them jumping onto the rooftops.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, Mohammed, General V.K. Singh raising a very pertinent question yesterday at Amritsar after his aircraft landed there, saying that many of these, in fact, most of these Indian workers had reached Iraq illegally with the help of illegal recruitment agents or agencies. But that said, looking ahead now, is that still a deterrent enough to prevent repeat of such incidents going forward, especially given that many Indians might be tempted to travel abroad in search of jobs to especially Iraq and other countries in West Asia?
Right, Ramesh, the fact that these 40 Indians, they may have travelled illegally, that is a fact. But there is a time and context in which everything is discussed. Now, these were Indians who were missing for almost about 4 years. Their dead bodies were being brought back and were being handed over to the families. At that time, people have said that General V.K. Singh should have exercised just a little bit more sensitivity in terms of how this was dealt. And also, at the time when people asked him, will the central government announce any compensation, there was another statement that he said that, look, compensation needs to be given, but it is not like a biscuit which I can distribute to people. Now, this was another statement that people have taken a strong objection towards. But besides that, looking forward, the government of India will have to look at some of these very unscrupulous agents who do not make bones about human trafficking, who take people to countries abroad in the lure of better jobs and better pay. Because at the end of the day, remember, people across India, this is not a new trend. This is something that's been happening for decades and is something that is likely to happen further. Now, yesterday, when General V.K. Singh was asked why is it that the government was not able to help these 40 Indians and bring them back alive, he said, look, there have been instances when the government has helped people who are stranded in certain such conflict situations. He gave the example of the nurses who were stranded in Tikrit. And he said that the government was able to successfully bring them back home alive, despite the fact that they were caught in a conflict situation. What happened in the case of these 40 Indians who were dead, who were killed by the ISIS, is that the government had no information whatsoever. There were no travel papers that were made, no visas had been applied for, and they had been transported there illegally. And this is, the ugly underbelly of how some of the migration for economic purposes takes place. These unscrupulous agents, they make these people pay through their nose, take them in ships and in unlawful means, and then deposit them there. And these are some of the questions which the Indian government will have to look at, Ramesh.
On that note, Mohammed Saleh, thank you so much for joining me with all that update on this developing story.